So let's explore a little more of this Jeremiah 49 prophecy that people are talking about, the prophecy against Elam. What I have up here is just a quick Google search, which says, when was Jeremiah a prophet? And as you can see, the AI overview says Jeremiah served as a prophet in Judah for approximately 40 years, from around 627 BC to 586 BC. What you will note, hopefully, is that 586 BC correlates to the final exile of the Babylonian captivity. It's around the time when Israel was carted away captive to Babylon, and their city and their temple was destroyed. Solomon's temple was destroyed circa 586 BC. So it was the third and final exile of the Babylonian captivity, which means that Jeremiah was in said Babylonian captivity. Interestingly enough, it was in his book where he prophesied 70 years of captivity, which Daniel picked up on and said, hey, according to what the prophet Jeremiah wrote, we're almost at the end of it. And he received the vision of this, the 70 weeks of years at the end of the 70th, at the end of the 70 years of captivity. Now, also in this AI overview, it says his ministry spanned the reigns of 5 kings: Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. For those of you who are familiar with my Jubilee construction timeline, you will know that one of the data points is related to Ezekiel 40, which uses the Judaic kings and the different exiles of the Babylonian captivity. I specifically used Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. But Josiah was the righteous king. It was Josiah's great Passover that was actually held in the Jubilee year, which immediately preceded Ezekiel's vision. So Josiah's great Passover and Ezekiel's vision were 49 years apart. Interestingly enough, so Josiah was a righteous king. He was promised that Israel would not be carted off captive during his reign, but it was almost immediately after his reign. I want to say he reigned for 40 years. Jehoahaz reigned for 3 months, and this is going to be in 2 Kings 23 and 24. Incidentally enough, and the Lord is so funny how he works this. Dan, one of my subscribers, had left a comment intending to refer to 2 Kings 2, 23 and 24, but had said something to the effect of missing chapter 2 and just saying 2 Kings 23 and 24. That's where these stories are about Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. They're in those 2 chapters. So God has really funny timing about that. And I was like, you know, he's probably prompting me to come on here and do a video about this. Reason being, Jeremiah is very clear that the prophecy against Elam came in the reign of Zedekiah. Zedekiah was the last of the Judaic kings. There will not be another Judaic king sitting on the throne until Jesus returns. Zedekiah reigned for 11 years. His reign came to an end in 586, circa 586, when Jerusalem was sacked and Solomon's temple was destroyed. So we get a time marker for this, which makes it super important for understanding what this prophecy is talking about. Jeremiah 49:34. The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah king of Judah, saying. Now, Elam is an ancient land area that is in the western part of what is modern day Iran. Different from what would be ancient Persia. However, the ancient Persian Empire did absorb Elam, and it was expanded well beyond that also. I'm going to bring up a map to show you the differences. The reason why this is important is because we're trying to understand the timing of the fall of Elam. So when did Elam fall? Elam, as an independent nation, fell in 646 BC. However, it continued to exist until right here. So, as a main power, it ceased to exist around 646 BC, which would be before Jeremiah started prophesying. Jeremiah started prophesying about 20 years later, 19 years later. So I have to move my window a little bit so I can see the the buttons to advance my screen. So Elam as an independent nation fell. However, the conquest, right here. The Elamites as a Middle East power lasted until 646 when the Assyrians stormed Elam and sacked Susa, which was the capital of Elam. Elam joined the Persian Empire in 539 BC when Cyrus the Great captured Susa. So what that does is it takes us to the end of the Babylonian Empire. Remember the Judaic kings. Zedekiah was the last of the Judaic kings, and the end of his reign corresponded to the sacking of Jerusalem and the destruction of Solomon's temple. Fast forward to the end of the Babylonian captivity, when Daniel became aware of the 70 years in captivity, received the vision of the 70 weeks. In the year following the end of the Babylonian captivity, Cyrus the Great, who was the king of the Persians. It was Darius, who was the king of the Medes, and Cyrus, who was the king of the Persians, because it was the Medo-Persian Empire which displaced Babylon, displaced the Babylonian Empire. So what you see here is that the Elamites joined the Persian Empire in the immediate aftermath of the Babylonian captivity, when the Babylonian Empire fell and the Medo-Persian Empire replaced it. What we learn from a couple of different places in the Bible is that Elam was known for its archers. There's actually 2 references to Elam in the burden of chapters. Isaiah 21 and Isaiah 22 discuss Elam. And this is interesting to me because I have discussed at very great length how in Isaiah, from chapter 13 with the burden of Babylon, through to chapter 24, which discusses the destruction of the heaven and the earth at the second coming and the second coming itself, the judgment of the fallen angels, the judgment of the people, all of that in Isaiah 24. But from Isaiah 13, except for Isaiah 14, all of the chapters discuss the burden of. By now, it's very well known the burden of Damascus. That's in Isaiah 17. But the burden of Babylon relates to Revelation 18 and 19. It is the very last thing that will occur before Jesus comes back at the second coming. And indeed, when you read Isaiah 13, it bleeds right into the second coming of Christ, which you would expect. All of the burden of chapters correlate to the pouring out of vial 7. All of them. And they would because they're tied to Babylon, or in close proximity to Babylon, rather. In the sequence of events given in Isaiah, it starts with the burden of Babylon, and it ends with the second coming of Christ. And in the chapters in between, it's the burden of, the burden of, the burden of. These are the cities of the nations that are prophesied to fall, part and parcel with the pouring out of vial 7, and at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Again, I have spoken about this at very great length. I have a chart in my Revelation 16 study which details the cities of the nations. I'm going to assume, without looking, that I did not actually note that Elam has sister passages elsewhere from Jeremiah 49, but it does in Isaiah 21 and Isaiah 22, which are right smack in the middle of the burden of chapters. So in Revelation 16:17, it says, "The seventh angel poured out his vial into the air. There came a great voice out of the temple from the throne, the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, 'It is done.' There were voices and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. The great city, Jerusalem, was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give to her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath." So when we look at the sister passages, Jeremiah 50 and 51 is the destruction of Babylon. The passage ending the previous chapter, the chapter right before that, is Elam. So it is literally the last city land area that is mentioned before Babylon gets destroyed, which is exactly the sequence of events mentioned in the pouring out of vial 7. The cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came into remembrance before God to give to her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. The order is reversed in Isaiah. It starts with Babylon rather than the cities of the nations falling. In Isaiah 13, it's the burden of Babylon. Like I said, Isaiah 14 talks about some other stuff. Isaiah 15 is the burden of Moab, as is 16. Isaiah 17 is the burden of Damascus. In chapter 18, it's about the woe unto Ethiopia. Chapter 19, it's the burden of Egypt. And then in chapter 20, it talks about Ashdod. Also talks about Ethiopia. It's only a six verse chapter. In chapter 21, it talks about the burden of the desert of the sea. And in chapter 22, it's the burden of the valley of vision. In chapter 23, it's the burden of Tyre. And then in Isaiah 24, it's the second coming of Christ with the destruction of the heavens and the earth and the judgment of the heavenly hosts on high who fell and will be destroyed. And these all correlate to Amos 1 and 2 rather, Zephaniah 2 and 3. There's a whole bunch of, and then Obadiah. It's Jeremiah 46 through 51, with 50 and 51 being Babylon. So 46 through 49 are the cities of the nations falling, of which Damascus is named in chapter 49, as is Elam. But again, Elam is mentioned in Isaiah 21 and 22. So these are sister passages in the burden of chapters. In Isaiah 21, the burden of the desert of the sea, as whirlwinds in the south pass through, so it cometh from the desert a terrible land. A grievous vision is declared unto me, the treacherous dealer dealeth treacherously, and the spoiler spoileth it. Spoiler spoileth. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. Remember Medes and Persians? I'm going to show you a map here. So here's some of the empires that you've probably heard about. But remember the Assyrian Empire that I talked about earlier. It was the Assyrian Empire that actually ended the House of Israel, the reign of the kings of the House of Israel, circa 722, 721, something in there BC. And then the Judaic kings lasted longer, but were ended by the Babylonian Empire. And then you have the Medes and the Persians. So here on this map, it kind of gives you the geographic land area for where some of these places would be. And if you bring them up on a map, what you'll see is actually the stuff that everybody's talking about, trying to link to Elam and the breaking of the bow and the trying to make that about their nuclear program is actually not in the spot where Elam would be. It's in the place where the Mede Empire would actually be. You could make a case maybe that Bushehr, the nuclear generated electric power plant, is in this area, but that would be it. It's actually up here in this part of modern day Iran that all of the nuclear stuff is. Here's another map here that shows the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, the Egyptian New Kingdom, Assyria, Babylonia, and Elam. So I know that there are some people who will fight to the death over this Elam thing being relevant to Iran's nuclear sites and that being the breaking of the bow, because people are desperate. And I'm not saying this negatively, but people are desperate for there to be some relevance to what is going on now in prophecy and the rapture. This is almost to the point of people tuning everything out but what they want to hear to make it relevant. And I will say the reason I'm doing this video is not to say you're wrong. It's because I believe that there is a misunderstanding of the prophetic intent here, how it relates, who it relates to, the time period it relates to, and how God will bring it about. The reason why I am so cautious to the point of blocking people for saying things like this on my channel, why I do not perpetuate these things, and why I don't even bring it up, because I don't want to hear it. The reason I don't want to hear it is because what Christians are opening the path to do is wish for death and destruction because they believe it fulfills prophecy. I actually got a comment earlier from someone who asked me if in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, means when an atomic bomb is dropped. There is such danger in trying to link the rapture to death and destruction, because then you're essentially wishing for death and destruction because you believe it's going to bring the rapture. I will never support that line of thinking in any way, shape, or form. The rapture is not tied to some kind of prophecy that promotes death and destruction of a people group. That's just not how that's going to work. The only case you could potentially make is that the very last point by which it would probably have to happen is when God starts raining judgment in Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39. That is a specific judgment designed to bring attention to God through the people who are coming against Israel. That's not what Jeremiah 49 is designed to do. Jeremiah 49 has got nothing to do with people coming against Israel. It has nothing to do with attacking a nuclear program, because it's what do they call that? Preemptive. Like, preeminent's not the right word. A preemptive strike. This has nothing to do with people coming against Israel. So essentially, what people who are trying to link this to the rapture are, or to some kind of prophecy on the way to the rapture, is they're wishing for death and destruction because that they think that there's some kind of good purpose served here. And to further try to link negative effects, the dropping of an atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb, to the rapture, means that you are wishing for that to occur, which would cause so much death and destruction because you want the rapture to happen. So you're tying something bad to something good, and essentially in wishing for the good, you would also have to be wishing for the bad. I do not support that in any way, shape, or form. I don't like that people are so invested in trying to find out when is the rapture going to happen that they're trying to link it to such negative outcomes. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. But if it was linked to anything, it would be linked to Ezekiel 38 and 39. And we have clear understanding of who the people groups involved in that are and the situationality of that. It is very clearly stated what Ezekiel 38 and 39 is. It is a ground invasion of the land of Israel. There's not going to be missiles involved. There's not going to be nuclear bombs involved. It's going to be cavalry and infantry coming to ground invade the land of Israel, and God is going to shut it down. They might wish death and destruction on Israel, but the only death and destruction that will be dealt is by God upon them. It's not going to be atomic bombs or nuclear bombs or anything like that. I really do not like that Christians are looking for any negative thing to occur to link to the rapture. We're not there yet. We will know when we are there, if we are intended to see Ezekiel 38 and 39. It will be clear as day what is going on, because that is a clear as day prophecy in the Bible. Elam is not that. So let's go back to Isaiah. This was an actual empire that existed when Jeremiah lived, and like I said, it stopped being a preeminent power in around 646 BC, which was before Jeremiah started prophesying, but it wasn't absorbed into the Persian Empire in finality ceased to exist completely until the Medo-Persian Empire took over after the Babylonian Empire. So that was where you bring in Cyrus and the rebuilding of the temple and stuff like that. But again, this is actually discussed in the burden of chapters. So Elam is going to have relevance to the end of the end times. among those cities of the nations that fall in conjunction with the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, technically in conjunction with the pouring out of vial 7, but in this, with regard to the timing of the second coming of Jesus Christ. So, in the relevance here, O Elam, besiege, O Media, all the sighing thereof I have made to cease. Therefore are my loins filled with pain. Pangs have taken hold upon me as the pangs of a woman that travaileth. What is the woman in travail always related to in the Bible? The 70th week. I was bowed down at the hearing of it. I was dismayed at the seeing of it. My heart panted, fearfulness affrighted me. The night of my pleasure hath he turned into fear unto me. Prepare the table, watch in the watchtower, eat, drink, arise, ye princes, and anoint the shield. For thus hath the Lord said unto me, Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he seeth. He saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen, a chariot of asses, a chariot of camels, and he hearkened diligently with much heed. And he cried, A lion! My Lord, I stand continually upon the watchtower in the daytime, and I am set in the wards whole nights. And behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. He answered and said, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Guys, this chapter is so clear. It's talking about the fall of the Babylonian Empire back in 539-ish BC, which led to the Medo-Persian Empire. You know, the head of iron, or excuse me, the head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon the lion, moved into the chest and arms of silver, which was the Medo-Persian Empire, moved into the belly and thighs of brass, which was the Greek Empire, moved into the legs of iron, feet of iron, and miry clay, which is the beast in Revelation 13, the beast and the 10 kings, the beast, false prophet, and the 10 kings. So primarily, this is about the movement from, it's the absorption of Elam into the Medo-Persian Empire, and how the Medo-Persian Empire deposed Babylon. But then it also has hearkenings to the second coming of Christ, because, hey, what does the second angel which flies through the midst of the heaven in Revelation 14 say? Between the preaching of the everlasting gospel and the say, don't worship the beast's image or receive his mark. The second angel in Revelation 14, which flies through the midst of heaven, says, Babylon is fallen. And then 3.5 years later, Babylon falls, and is described in Revelation 18 as the very last thing that occurs before Jesus returns at the second coming. So yes, where it started in Daniel is where it ends in Revelation. Babylon. So there's only two options here. It's either referring to the fall of Babylon, circa 539, 538 BC, or it's referring to Revelation 18. Those are your only two options. In this case, it's talking about both. Those are the only two things it could potentially be talking about with respect to Elam. When Elam was absorbed once upon a time, or when it's among the cities of the nations that fall in conjunction with the pouring out of vial 7 and the second coming of Christ. Those are the only two options. There is no other event, there is no other time where that would be appropriate to discuss. So it's not for us, it's not for now, it's not a sign on the way to the rapture, it's not tied to the rapture, it is not tied to what is going on now. It was tied historically to what was going on then, and it's tied prophetically to the cities of the nations falling in conjunction with pouring out of vial 7 and Babylon being fallen. Please read Revelation 14, Angel 2, and Revelation 18 for Babylon falling. He said, Babylon is fallen. All the graven images of her God he hath broken down under the ground. O my threshing, and the corn of my floor, that which I have heard of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, have I declared unto you. And then it goes into the burden of Duma. He calleth to me out of Seir. So that's probably going to have to do with Edom. And then it actually, in verse 13, the burden of Arabia. And then in chapter 22, the burden of the valley of vision. What aileth thee now? That thou art wholly gone up to the housetops. That thou art full of stirs, a tumultuous city, a joyous city. Thy slain men are not slain with the sword, nor dead in battle. All thy rulers are fled together. They are bound by the archers. This is what it means. The bow of Elam, they were literally archers. This is not figurative language to describe missiles or nuclear sites or anything like that. Breaking the bow of Elam was literally a reference to their archers, which they were known for. All thy rulers are fled together, they are bound by the archers. All that are found in thee are bound together, which have fled from far. Therefore said I, look away from me, I will weep bitterly, labor not to comfort me, because of the spoiling of the daughter of my people. For it is a day of trouble, and a day of treading down, like the winepress, and of perplexing by the Lord God of hosts in the valley of vision, breaking down all the walls, and of crying to the mountains, and Elam bare the quiver with chariots of men and horsemen, and Kir uncovered the shield. And it shall come to pass that the choicest valley shall be full of chariots, and the horsemen shall set themselves in array at the gate. Later in this chapter, where does it say? It shall come to pass in that day that I will call my servant Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with thy robe and strengthen him with thy girdle, and I will commit thy government into his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. This is actually in Revelation, a letter to the church of Philadelphia. This is Jesus, the one who has the key of David. He that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth that no man openeth. It's the keys to the kingdom. He's going to give him the keys to the kingdom, and he's going to lay the government upon his shoulders. This is what Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 talk about, I believe, right? For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David, and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts shall perform this. So this is actually where Revelation 3's intro to the letter to the church of Philadelphia comes from, is Isaiah 22, talking about Jesus. To the angel of the church of Philadelphia write, these things saith he that is holy, he that is true, he that hath the key of David, the keys to the kingdom. And he that openeth and no man shutteth, and shutteth that no man openeth. It comes from Isaiah 22. 22. The key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so he that openeth and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open, and I will fasten him as a nail in a sure place. And he shall be for a glorious throne to his father's house. I am sorry for whoever needs Jeremiah 49 to be about something other than what it is about. Any reference that you have to Elam is going to be one of two references. Historically, to the absorption of Elam into the Medo-Persian Empire who deposed Babylon, or prophetically into the cities of the nations that fall, and great Babylon comes into remembrance before God to give to her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath, in conjunction with the pouring out of vial 7, and just before the second coming of Christ. There's nothing else to say about this. It is contextually inaccurate to link it to anything else. So, Jeremiah 49. Verse 34, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah king of Judah, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. Which again, this happened in finality around the end of the Babylonian captivity when Elam was absorbed into Persia and Medo-Persia overthrew Babylon. So this might be why a lot of people link Elam to Persia. But Elam and Persia are not the same. And pretty sure, yeah, here's the first map that I had that just shows the difference of the empires. Elam and the Persian Empire are not the same. It got absorbed into, and you know that because it talks about, I want to say in Esther, and I'm going off script here. So it refers to the palace at Shushan. I want to say in the book of Esther, Xerxes. Yeah. So it refers to the palace at Shushan. Ahasuerus. He was Xerxes the first. He was, I believe, the grandson. Either the grandson or the great-grandson of Cyrus. It's who Esther was married to. And the palace was at Shushan, which would have been in the capital of Elam was Susa or Shushan. So it would have been absorbed into the Persian Empire and it would have had relevance there. But strictly speaking, in Jeremiah 49 is not talking about anything other than the ancient land area Elam, which ceased to exist in finality when it was absorbed into the Medo-Persian Empire after the Babylonian captivity, 530 something BC, which I talked about at the beginning of this video. He said, regarding Elam, they're archers. Remember, we talked about this in Isaiah 21 and 22 just a second ago. I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. Yes, which was their archers. Literally, not figuratively. It's not talking about missiles and a nuclear program. It is literally talking about archers, which were literally mentioned in Isaiah 21. And upon Elam I will bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven and will scatter them toward all those winds, and there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. So it tore down that kingdom and scattered them, and they also got absorbed into other places. So it says, for I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies and before them that seek their life, and I will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, saith the Lord, and I will send the sword after them till I have consumed them. That's where you get into the sister passages, especially in Isaiah 22. Especially in Isaiah 22. And even 21, where it talks about travail and birth pangs and the Lord trampling and all of that. Like, these are second coming references. He will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, saith the Lord, and I will send the sword after them till I have consumed them. I will set my throne in Elam, and I will destroy from thence the king and the princes, saith the Lord. This is the same thing that he talks about in the other burden of chapters. He's going to destroy the leadership out of these places. These are going to be the ones that come against him ultimately in Armageddon, and he's going to set his throne in. That is not literal, that is figurative. It's essentially talking about the government being upon his shoulders, and Jesus is going to rule the whole of the world with a rod of iron. So he's going to set his throne in means he's going to be king over it. That's a second coming reference. And then going to bring those who were scattered and who are his back to settle in that land. Remember that the Gentiles, we are going to be ruling over the nations in the kingdom. And the 12 apostles, per Matthew, I want to say 20, Matthew 18, Matthew 20, something about that, talks about how they're going to be sitting on thrones and judging the 12 tribes in the kingdom. So Israel, the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles are going to be judging the 12 tribes of Israel in the kingdom. And we Gentiles are going to be ruling over the nations. We're going to share the rule and reign with Christ for that 1,000 years. There are going to be people, Gentiles in the kingdom, who are going to be living in those nations that we are going to be sharing the rule with Christ. And so this says in the latter days, he's going to bring the captives back, and they're going to settle in that land, and they're going to live there. So obviously it's not talking about Israel, because Israel, the Jews are going to be in Israel in the kingdom. This is one of the things I think maybe is confusing language for folks who don't realize that this is how the King James writes stuff. It says, it will come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam, saith the Lord. This doesn't mean what it says. It means he's going to set the captives free. He's going to end the captivity, essentially. I will show you with similar references that this is what this is King James speak for setting the captives free. He says the same thing in Joel 3, talking about Israel. Joel 3:1, for behold, in those days and in that time shall I bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. Now he's going to set the captives of Judah and Jerusalem free by bringing all nations down into the valley of decision, where he sits and judges them. The heathen round about treads the winepress. This is also a point of confusion for those of us who think that Jesus emptied out Abraham's bosom. I have gotten countless questions about this, and it's not something I've addressed because it really doesn't matter, and I'll address it now. But this is one of the things, is there are a lot of people who think when Jesus descended into the heart of the earth, he cleared out Abraham's bosom and took all the Old Testament saints to heaven, because there's one verse that says And remember, if it only says it one place, you're probably not discerning the text correctly. Got to find it in 2 or more places. Ephesians 4:8. Wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. It means he set the captives free. And he didn't do it by physically relocating them. He did it by dying on the cross for sins and setting people free from the law of sin and death through belief in him. So that's what that's a reference to. Leading captivity captive or bringing about the captivity of, those are references to setting captives free, not bringing people into captivity. And so that's where I'm going to end this video. The fortunes of Elam, setting the captives free, is not going to occur now. It's going to occur in the future in the kingdom. This is a reference to restoration. And we know that restoration, whether it be to Israel or to the nations or restoring the world, restoring the earth in kingdom, it's always going to be in kingdom. It's not going to be to anything that occurs now. And we should know this just at a very surface level when we say, okay, Elam doesn't actually exist. It was absorbed into the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire is going to, or not the Persian Empire, but Persia is listed in Ezekiel 38. There will be no restoration or setting the captives free between now and Ezekiel 38 and 39, and certainly not after Ezekiel 38 and 39 until the second coming of Christ. So I don't really know how people would interpret the last verse of Jeremiah 49 to somehow say that that's going to occur now. It says, it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam. No. It says, I will restore the fortune of Elam. That's what that means. It's not leading them into captivity. It's setting them free. And there's not going to be freedom there. It's going to be bad up to and including them coming against Israel. Because, like I said, the Elam thing was absorbed into Persia, and Persia is listed as one of the people groups, land areas that comes against Israel in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Does that sound like they're going to have their fortunes restored, or that they're going to be mightily ticked off for some reason and try to get theirs back because their fortunes are not restored? There's no way that that's going to happen between now and the rest of whatever Israel is doing over there and Ezekiel 38 and 39. Not on the table. So I would challenge people to make sure that we understand when we're reading these things, that if we're using specific translations of the Bible, that we understand what the writing means. And if you're using the King James, anytime you say, I will bring again the captivity, that means set the captives free. It doesn't mean make captive. It means to let go from captivity. Restore from captivity. I gave you a couple of examples about that. But all you've got to do is go to Bible Hub, and it's going to show you what that means, and all of the translations say the same thing. Restore Elam from captivity. Except King James, I will bring again the captivity. No, it's restore, release from. Restore the fortunes. That's what it means. So that is highly not relevant to now. It is highly relevant to what Jesus will do for believers when he returns at the second coming, and people who are his will go into the kingdom. And again, Elamites are Gentiles, so they wouldn't be living in the land of Israel. They'll be settled back in their land to live there, I would assume, is what that means. This is the first video that I've done going through Jeremiah 49, and I realized that, like, I'm either going to be preaching to the choir, people who understand that it's not being fulfilled now and that's not what's going on in Israel, between Israel and Iran, or people who are like vehemently opposed to hearing this because prophecy is being fulfilled and you can't tell me otherwise. Great, it's fine. It doesn't matter if you think it is great and if you think it's not great. But essentially, if you think it's being fulfilled, then I would ask you what the purpose here is. What is it tied to that you see as meaningful? Or is it just, hey, prophecy is being fulfilled? It's like, okay, just a thing. But you would have to associate meaning to that because all of the prophecies have meaning attached to them. There's meaning attached to the where, when, who, how, and why. To just put this prophecy out here now is meaningless unless you are attaching some sort of meaning to it. And then I would say, what is the meaning that you're attaching to it? Because the meaning that's being attached in the biblical sense is restoration for the people of Elam, who once upon a time lost everything. And they're going to have that restoration because there's a belief in Jesus Christ. It's forward-looking to kingdom. It's forward-looking to the judgment that they would experience in history, the judgment that they will experience as the cities of the nations that fall, and restoration for the believers in kingdom. That's the meaning attached to that. So if you are taking it out of that context, then you have to be associating some type of meaning to it. It can't just be an arbitrary prophecy that's not linked to anything, because then you're making prophecy meaningless, and 100% of prophecies are meaningful to time, place, people, and reason. So in order to believe that prophecy is being fulfilled, you have to be linking it to something. If it's not linked to something, then it's not being fulfilled. And you're just maybe misunderstanding it. So that's what I would caution people about is you have to assign meaning to it. So are you saying that it's meaningful for the rapture? A sign on the way to? Again, that's arbitrary. That's arbitrary. It's not being fulfilled right now. That's not what Jeremiah 49 is about. Not about the nuclear program. This is the same thing that people were doing with September 2017 and Revelation 12. Those two things have nothing to do with one another. This is the exact same thing by another name that people are doing right now is Jeremiah 49 and the Iran-Israel nuclear program strike. Those two have nothing to do with one another. So separate those two things in your mind if you're able to do that. And if you're not, you do you. Hopefully this has been helpful to someone. I'll see you guys later.